Ed, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so pumped to chat with you. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions around running a SaaS business. And these are all questions I want to ask you and know for myself, regardless of this interview series. So thank you so much, Ed. And for those people who don't know you, you're the partner and one of the founders, I believe, at Scaleworks. Is that right?
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. It's great to chat. Yeah, I co-founded Scaleworks with my business partner, Lou Mormon. We also co-founded Soilworks last year and Element SaaS Finance a couple of years ago. But Scaleworks is the SaaS one.
Nice. So, how many SaaS businesses does Scaleworks are they invested in or managing right now?
That's a good question. I should know that. We probably have 10 businesses total. I'd say Scaleworks' current SaaS portfolio is maybe 6 or 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and you're always rotating, right? You guys buy, operate, sometimes exit.
Yeah, I mean, look, funny, exiting is the least fun part of it.
Yeah.
But if you're a fund, and I do believe that businesses have, there's a certain point in time where we can add the most value, and then there'll be better people to add value, right? Strategic buyer or a bigger fund. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say we're always selling, but we do. We buy, we hold, we operate and grow and try and basically change the trajectory and change the size of company, and then there'll be someone else after X number of years.
Love it. Makes sense. Yeah, I like the fact that you're like not in the business of exiting. That just happens when it happens, right? When it doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
or when it makes sense.
Yeah.
So obviously you manage multiple companies. First of all, I mean, are there any tips, any best, maybe not best practices, but any words of wisdom you can share around like how to stay sane and own 7 businesses, 10 businesses?
Yeah, have great CEOs. It sounds simple, but I would say it's so difficult, right? It's so difficult to hire we consider our CEOs to be adopted founders, and I think they do as well, right? Because we buy SaaS companies that are in the $5 to $15 million zone, and we did smaller originally, but that's where we are right now. And typically it's a product-led founder, so we bring a CEO in, and it's hard to be an appointed CEO, right? And it's hard to change. And so the biggest thing look, it's the greatest cliche in business to say, oh, it's all about people. But it is. And everyone always asks, how do you find deals in Scaleworks? I'm like, well, look, there's loads of SaaS companies out there. It's not. We only have to find, 2 or 3 a year. So that's not, with respect to our M&A team, yeah, of course it's hard work, but it's not super difficult. But getting people who can run it is extremely difficult, right? And there's lots of great people out there, but people who are principally aligned, right? And so, the biggest tip is find people that are principally aligned, that you can trust and have clear goals, right? So we've got quarterly boards, we do weekly check-ins. It's nice that all of our CEOs are in our office in San Antonio, so we see them, informally all the time. So it's not a kind of a remote board, right? So we're owner operators, so I hope we're lower on the operational side. And so we do weekly check-ins with our CEO. We have clear strategy, we have clear goals for the year and the quarter, and then we update on them. And so I feel like if you've got a great CEO and you're relatively in touch with the business, then you'll spot problems before they're, molehills before they become mountains. I wouldn't say we've got it perfectly right, but that the simple answer is if you've got great CEOs and they can hire great people, then it should be an easy life.
Love it. So the fact that you have the office, you can get the informal check-ins or the water cooler conversations, quarterly board meetings, and then weekly meetings with the CEOs. Is that right?
Weekly check-ins if we're not, in the first 6 months, it's definitely a weekly check-in. But yourself, as you build a relationship with someone, informal check-ins work great, right? And as they build out their team and grow in the second and third year, they want more autonomy, and rightly so. And there's an element of, look, we've all built a good feel for this business. And look, we also get monthly metrics, right? So the finance team will send out, obviously the finance is both the core SaaS metrics, right? Everyone knows the core SaaS metrics. And so, I wouldn't say we dive deep on those. Obviously the CEOs do, but that's also a good way to keep a good field check on the business.
Love it. So my next question was going to be around hiring key roles, but it sounds like you hire the CEO and then they hire the key roles, right?
Well, yeah, to a point. Look, we've had some CEO turnover over a few years as we've kind of learned what the right thing is. And so I would say that CEOs and leaders, so VPs and above, we want to be involved with hiring. Obviously, it's like the CEO will bring them in and has the ultimate say, but we'd like to interview.
Hmm.
Below that, of course, we don't micromanage, but yeah, we definitely want to help test for principal alignment with the CEOs and with the VPs. And I think, look, when it comes to hiring, everyone says, hire slow, fire fast. And in my experience, myself included, everyone does the opposite, right? You hire
Yeah.
fast, great interview. And then you go after a month, like, oh, this isn't working out. And people fire slow. And so I think we have to challenge ourselves to hire fast, fire fast, right? There's a diminishing return after the fifth or sixth interview with someone where you're not going to learn anymore. And so
Yeah.
taking it out over time isn't going to work. And so at some point you have to make, you have to make your bet. And I think it's fair to the person, if it's not working out, to not drag it out, right? It's not good for the
Yeah.
company, their teammates, morale, or that individual's own career. And so, hard as that may be, and might make it look like turnover can be high sometimes, I think the only way to build a great team is there is a little bit of trial and error, no matter what the best interview process in the world is. And so we do a lot of then testing for principal alignment, right? I mean, the CEOs and teams have to test for cultural alignment, but I think you say, look, here's the strategy and here's the principles of how we run a business. And interesting, we like to charge the right price because most companies you buy at day one, product-led founders typically undercharge, right? Founders always value their time. And so, a small thing is, well, we want to right price this, right? Not just to make more money, because, recently one of our businesses actually reduced their price, but you want to have the right price for that customer. And that's always changing over time, right? It's always evolving. And so everyone always says, oh yeah, I totally agree with that. And no one ever actually agrees in principle because it's hard to go and change price on a customer. And so what we've learned is, outside of just, testing for principle alignment isn't just saying, here's my principle, do you agree? It's, you have to, do scenario tests and say, well, if in this scenario with this person, would you hire them? Or, if they wouldn't move to the office and it was a key role for you, would you do it? Or anyway, so I think a key learning for us over the years has been to test for principle alignment, because you often get resumes that look great and do great interviews, but they may be a disaster in a principle and cultural fit. So test for principle fit and test deeply enough with scenarios, and we still get it wrong a lot of the time.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, I think thank you for your honesty there. I think you can make it sound better than it is, but it's like, hey, you're not going to be perfect. 4 or 5 interviews is about as much as you can get information from somebody. And frankly, the hard part about principal alignment is, as a founder or the partner or whatever, you have to have principles, and you have to go think about what your principles are so that you can be aligned. And do you find principles for you or for Scaleworks change over the years or evolve?
Yeah. I think last year we looked at our principles and said, we need to redo them. And some of them stayed and some of them changed. Some of them got thrown in the bin. And look, I think we've got 6 principles, right? So I don't think you can have loads. And we've got the unique one of, we always get asked in interviews, what's the Scaleworks culture like? And I always say there is no culture. Well, there is. We've got a team of 7, right? The little Scaleworks team, but CEOs and teams have to build their own culture, right? If you walk around our office, you'll see every culture is different, because it does flow from the CEO and leadership team, because the type of company they're going to run, all right? But on principles, and so while they do change, I think that the only way to have any alignment is if everyone agrees on, look, we've got these core principles that we're going to run Scaleworks companies on. And culture can be its own thing, and every company should have its own, but we will run them. And so as the principles change, we don't get our leaders together enough, probably, especially in the last year. But we try and share, look, here's what we're thinking, it's basically our Scaleworks thesis. Here's why we set it up and how we want to operate.
Makes sense. Cool. I love it. Yeah. A couple more questions. Obviously, SaaS is a crowded space. It's getting crowded, more and more crowded every day. I mean, I guess that's my vantage point. What do you think about, growing and innovating in a space in today's age of SaaS, really?
Well, I think there's 2 phases of SaaS, right? So first of all, I think there's still like I don't know where what the timeline is, but phase 1, maybe the last decade or so, is SaaS tools to run businesses, right? Which is what lots of us have done, and lots of Scaleworks companies are. And I don't know how many startups there was in that space last year. I mean, the core, we'll call it the primary SaaS space. And I worry, I just don't think we can keep supporting that many new startups. And I think there will be consolidation in the space. We're already seeing it. And look, I think SaaS, the core SaaS business, or the core whatever SaaS has been for the last decade, has a bright future for a decade, 2 decades, probably. Yeah, super bright future. But I'd be worried if I was looking for loads of startups to invest in. I think there's just been so many, and it's been so, any space that goes on fire like SaaS and attracts that many startups, at some point you get saturated. And My gut is we're probably there, but I'm not doing startups, so I could be wrong. I do
Yeah.
think there's a second phase of SaaS though where it's not SaaS, and it's just we call it SaaS still, but it's just vertical businesses, and so it's healthcare, it's logistics, it's e-commerce, or it's fulfillment for it, or whatever it is, or it's billing. It's and it's just I'm just going to set up a business in healthcare or logistics. Of course, it's
Mhm.
powered by SaaS. Of course, it's a software-led business. But I
Yeah.
don't know that I'd necessarily say I've started a SaaS business. I'd say I've started a logistics business.
Hmm.
And how is it powered? Well, it's SaaS. This is the world we live in now. Well, like SaaS is just the
Hmm.
backbone of the internet.
Yeah.
And so I think the next phase is really they're we can call them SaaS, but that category might be too broad. They should just be called logistics startup or whatever that category is.
I love it. That makes sense. So you're thinking right now it's SaaS and it's getting close to the end of that. We can call it that. The next phase is actually saying it's actually not it's SaaS. That's the model how we charge. But the problem we're solving is it's a healthcare. We're using technology enabled cloud services and subscription model to do whatever, right? That makes complete sense because it's obvious. It's so easy, right?
Yeah, look,
Um,
I think the SaaS, which you call it the SaaS business tools, I think that's probably relatively, maturing, has tons of growth left, but I wouldn't necessarily go start a company there tomorrow. I think we may have too many, but
yeah.
but but the vertical businesses that are starting, I mean, SaaS is just another word now, like business. It's of
Yeah.
course powered by software. I mean, duh, like you said. So yeah, and
Love
and
it.
there's probably unlimited opportunity there, like there always is in business.
Absolutely. That makes sense. So I guess my last question here is, what do you look for when you're evaluating or buying a SaaS business, right? Given the space where it's at, where it's going, or your views on that, what do you look for? Maybe personally, maybe it's principles at Scaleworks. Your thoughts would be welcome.
Well, I guess this is the Scaleworks thesis to a degree, right? We look at, so we look at three things. We look at uh, downside, middle ground, and upside, right? So first of all, downside, don't lose money. We're not in the VC game. We're not in the, oh, let's get 10x returns and sure, like, if some of the portfolio doesn't work out, that's okay. We're in the, we want no losses. And so, and we want, obviously great returns, but more important is don't lose money.
Hmm.
So downside protection is you look and say, okay, is there obvious low hanging fruit in this business? I've said product led founders already. Is it a product led founder who loves iterating the product, but lots of product led founders don't really love listening to customers because they know too much themselves, or they maybe don't love marketing or don't value it. Right? Certainly engineers don't always value marketing, and lots of times sales isn't valued, or they haven't built a leadership team, or they had like some founders just look, I don't know how to scale, I don't want to scale, and that's when the next phase of business happens, and they're looking for an exit, and so you want to find low hanging fruit where it's mispriced. There's no focus on sales and marketing. They don't look. Our diligence team will kill me, but they whenever we're looking at a business, they're like, God, we can't get this data. We don't have these metrics. We don't have these finances. I always say, great, because if they all existed, it'd be a really well run business, and it's unlikely a small business is really well run. And so that's our job. And you look at that and say, okay, we don't have to be the best business people in the world, but if we do the kind of nuts and bolts right, this should become a better business. So downside is, okay, if we're not overpaying and there's some obvious kind of low hanging fruit things to do in the first 6 months, great. Okay, that's number one. You can sleep at night. Now you shouldn't lose money. And then the middle ground is, okay, if we build a good team, is it a good space? Do the customers like it? Is the funnel good? And if we kind of, if we put one foot in front of the other and do a good job with a good team and we're patient, can we accelerate growth? And we'll doing that, build a decent business that, let's call it 20, 30, 40% growth for 3 or 4 years. So if we strong confidence that just being average business people, we'll be able to achieve that. Right? So you want to get that when you're kind of thinking, look, this is probably going to be good. And then you also want to have, right, because that in itself is not enough. You want to have the upside and go, okay, do we have 10 ideas for how this could be a great business? Have we got 10 category ideas, either to subdivide or innovate or change the positioning? And so, if you have one or two, I mean, if you have 10, they're likely all wrong. But if you have one and it's likely wrong, you're kind of screwed if that's the only one you have. And so if you
Yeah.
have 10, when you dig into the business, when you own it, you're going to have 100 more. And so my kind of gut check on it is, if I have lots of ideas for this business, we're all going to have lots more. And so is the team.
Hmm.
And then there is an opportunity actually to knock it out of the park. And so, which you want that too, because that's more exciting. It's easier to build when you think, we can really do something here. And so, but I wouldn't do an investment with all upside with a, with downside not covered, and with, and with hard work, with the middle ground of hard work not being kind of likely to guarantee a result, I still wouldn't do it just on upside, right? I want there to be upside chance, but I think we have to cover all three. Anyway, long answer. That's how we look at it.
That's very helpful to hear, because I think there's lots of buyers like, this is the upside. Look at all the things we could do, and you just forget that like you have to manage the business and you have to keep it going, and it can implode, right? So if you buy a business in COVID, what are the downsides, right? Or there must be some. Must be, if you're buying at the tail end of COVID and you're buying an e-commerce SaaS platform, is the world going to change in a year, right? That could be a downside, right? I mean, for the negative, or is it positive? Nobody knows really the future. But yeah, I think I love the fact that you're thinking about don't lose money, right? You know, Scaleworks and companies buying SaaS companies are not VC funds where they're betting on 100 things, 2 or 3 are going to pay out and mostly return the fund. You need to return success on every single investment, right? So that totally makes sense. I love it. So downside protection, middle ground. Can you make this thing grow okay with just being good, diligent business people? Which I'd have to say is probably not the case for when you're a founder, right? You might just be like, oh, they don't have a customer support person. There's no salesperson. Like, this is an obvious thing that like best practice needs to be there. And then, 10 ideas or something of that nature on the upside. So thank you so much. I could talk to you all day long, and I'm sure at some point we will when things come back to normal. But thank you, Ed. And where can people go to learn more, find you, whatnot?
Scaleworks.com, simple website. So reach out and say hello.